Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my game review for Boise State versus Appalachian State. Boise State absolutely dominating in a key game that matched up the Mountain West and the future Pac-12 versus an up-and-coming conference in the Sun Belt. This game is going to have a ripple effect for seasons to come outside of just this year, as analysts and the media look to compare the East Coast conferences and the American Athletic Conference and Sun Belt versus the Pac-12 and start to look at who is actually that top team above top conference at the top of the group of six. This was a massive statement win for Boise State in that aspect, and it was also a massive statement win for a much maligned secondary that has had a lot of struggles so far this season. Came out and had a huge game, which we will talk about here in a moment, and then a Boise State team overall. I don't know if any of us expected to feel like this again after the first week. I don't know if any of us expected this season to feel like this. This is not an FCS program. It's not a bottom of the group of five type of program either. This is an App State team that has historically been at the top of the Sun Belt. While they may not be there this year, they are certainly a team with a winning culture and a good middle of the road potential upside of a strong Sun Belt conference team as well. This was a big win for Boise State as they continue to reclaim this season. 3 straight games where they've scored 45 points or more in each of those games, and tonight Boise State winning 47-14. A lot of really good score predictions during the score prediction challenge for the game preview. A lot of really close ones, and this one literally came down to the wire as far as time frame goes. There were 2 score predictions that both had the exact same margin as far as just being off of the score prediction. So one was 49-17, so 2 points off of the offensive score, 3 points off of the defensive score, and then the other one was 45-17. Get same defensive margin, and then again just 2 points just coming from below this time off of the offensive score. Both comments made on the exact same day, minutes apart. Like I say, if you have a score prediction that is not exactly right, I'll take multiple score predictions that are exactly right, but if there's none that are exactly right, I just do whoever's closest. If there's multiple people who are the same margin away, then I take whoever posted first. So this case, the winner was TNT6744, TNDT6744 with a prediction of 49-17. Congratulations on getting the right or close right score prediction, and also for commenting early, which is why I always remind everyone to make sure you like, subscribe. Also click that notification bell so you know when the videos come out so you can get your score predictions early. Of course, at the end of the season, all winners of these weekly score predictions will be entered to win in a drawing this Ashton Jeanty jersey. All right, let's get into reviewing this game. We're going to go through the offense, the defense, the special teams. We're going to review each of those and assign a grade. Then we'll also look at how Boise State performed against my 3 keys to the game coming into this matchup, and then take a little look ahead into next week, which luckily Boise State was not looking ahead in this matchup, clearly focused on winning and showing up in this game, as I think is going to be the trend as you see throughout the rest of the season. They know that they are a game away from being out every game from here on out after the week 1 game. So you see that focus and intensity. Again, incredible job. Hats off to this coaching staff for being able to rally a team that looked not like any Boise State team we've ever seen, except for maybe 2005 opening game versus Georgia. Other than that, did not look like Boise State as we recognize them in that week 1 game. And they have done an incredible job of recovering the season, rallying this program, reestablishing that focus and intensity that has bled off into every single matchup the rest of the way, and it clearly showed on the field tonight. But we will also look ahead, now that the game is over, to the Notre Dame game as well. One last thing I want to say before I get into the rest of the game review, here is this video specifically is not sponsored. The previous 3 have been, but I just want to give a shout out to Expedia Cruises. Thank you so much for sponsoring the previous 3 videos. If you did not go to their grand opening today, I would really encourage you to check out their website. Again, I'll put a link in the description. Not a sponsored video, but they have been so kind and worked so great with me. So I'll put a link in the description. If you have any travel plans going to any of the away games or whatever waits for Boise State in the postseason, please check them out. And if you want to check them out in person, they are at 13601 West McMillan Road in Boise. So let's get into reviewing this game for Boise State. Offensively, this was a great performance overall. It really was. I think there were moments where Boise State struggled, specifically the passing game, which is a weird thing to say considering that Boise State or Maddox Madsen specifically, threw for 321 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And you came away feeling like the passing game just wasn't all there. There was a lot of drop passes by wide receivers and tight ends in this game. And then Maddox Madsen just didn't look right throughout the matchup. Couple of missed opportunities, missed throws, a wide open Chris Marshall. Who knows whether or not he would have caught it, as he did drop another wide open pass at a later point in the game. But there were some missed opportunities, including that wide open touchdown to Chris Marshall. So you do have to wonder how much of an impact the injury from last week was impacting Maddox Madsen. I think that's the most clear explanation for this game. He just didn't look confident in that leg. He wasn't running the ball at all. He actually had negative yardage, which has happened to him in the past, but it's very, very rare. He has very few yards where he has negative yards. His legs are a huge part, not necessarily as a designed running quarterback, but in his creativity and being able to make something out of nothing. That is a big factor. It kind of keys him into the game when he knows he has an ability to take off and run, and you just didn't feel like that was there today. His rollouts didn't look right. His feet work, even the announcers commented on it, just looked a little sloppy. And again, I think all of that comes down, quite explainably so, to still recovering or tenderness on that left leg injury, I believe it was, from last week. And so for Maddox Madsen, he looked a little gimpy in this game, but despite all of that, still a great performance for Boise State offensively, passing 25-37 for 320 yards and 4 touchdowns. And a big part of that was a couple of wide receivers really stepping up in this game. Specifically, I want to shout out Quentin Brown here. Obviously, a former guest on the channel, the first ever recruit that I ever interviewed on the channel. Obviously, I've had several recruiting interviews since then, but the first one I ever interviewed was Quentin Brown, and he stepped up huge in this game. 29-yard touchdown with his only catch of the game, but his first collegiate touchdown, a 29-yard touchdown, and it was not easy. He had to jump up, go up and get it, and ended up getting just gashed teeth out of it or chin or some kind of injury to his face after it, and he paid with his body, but he sold out for the team and had a huge catch. And then the other player that really stepped up in this game was Latrell Caples. Latrell Caples, we've been looking for that leader to step up on the offense. Obviously, you've seen some explosiveness out of some of the running backs, Sarah Gaines, Dylan Riley, obviously last week, but you haven't really seen a true leader step up in the passing game. Now, obviously, Ben Ford, Max Madsen, they have some great chemistry going on right now. Ben Ford had a good game, 3 catches, 45 yards, a touchdown. That touchdown pass, one of Max Madsen's best throws, a laser on a great post route by Ben Ford. Great touchdown, right in between the area of 3 defenders, and he got right in there to him. It was a great throw. So he has obviously been stepping up, but not in the same way as a true take over the game, look to them on third down type of player. And Latrell Caples last week really started to step up into that role, and he continued that into this game with his first touchdowns of the season, his first multi-touchdown game since the last season versus San Diego State. 5 catches for 84 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game. And in the first drive, 2 of his catches, so 5 catches in the game, 2 of his catches both came on key third downs. The first one, a 3rd and 9, a 16-yard catch to continue the drive. And then finally at the end, in the goal line, Boise State starting to struggle a little bit. He had a great catch on a 3rd and 1 to be able to then run into the end zone as well. Also had a little bit of a broken tackle. It broke 2 tackles to get into the end zone. And so the wide receiver stepping up around Maddox Madsen, even when he's having a bit of an off night, when he's throwing a little bit off platform, can't put everything behind the ball. The fact that Boise State has their wide receivers starting to really step up around him shows that Boise State can still be effective even when Maddox Madsen isn't on his best game, something that was not the case in week 1. Maddox Madsen struggled, and the wide receivers weren't there to step up for him. Well, now, even when Maddox Madsen isn't having his best night, he can still come out of it with a great statistical performance because his wide receiver and team is stepping up around him. And that's not to say that Maddox Madsen was atrocious tonight. Had some off moments, but he also had some really nice throws as well. What I would like to see a little bit, I think all of the fans, we see those flashes. The one element missing from this passing game is Chris Marshall. He had an amazing catch. It was the 2nd drive of Boise State, or maybe it was the 4th drive. Sorry, the 5th drive. All right, 5th drive of the game. I know I was getting there. Eventually, you list enough drives, you get to the one you're trying to talk about. The 5th drive of the game there for Chris Marshall. Had a great catch, 26 yards, a bit of a comeback route over the outside shoulder. He goes up with the defender right on him, and it makes an incredible catch. I mean, just really, really tight window. Good throw by Max Madsen, but an even better catch by Chris Marshall. And then second half, a little bit later on, he doesn't have a defender near him. The closest defender is the safety, who's about 6 yards behind him, and he drops a wide open throw right in his chest. And he probably, if he'd caught that, he probably could have ran it all the way down to the end zone. And maybe that's what happened there. His eyes got a little bit greedy looking downfield before he secured the grab. I think that's probably, he's such a yard after catch kind of guy. But you see those flashes, and he has struggled to be consistent, which is what the coaches said about him, why we didn't see much of him last season. Also dealing some injury, I believe, was the case there as well. And then coming into spring ball, he has those highlight reel catches, but he's struggled throughout the spring and this season and fall camp, obviously, to be a consistent threat for Boise State. If Chris Marshall can just unlock that next level potential, he truly does have that next level potential, probably a higher ceiling than anybody in this wide receiver room. He just has to unlock it. And so that was one element that was missing from tonight that needs to continue to be developed. But overall for Boise State, great job in the passing game. The run game also was solid, a solid running performance overall for Boise State in this game, 152 yards rushing. So not a bad performance by any means. Certainly not the take over the game type performance we saw last week versus Air Force, but not a bad rushing performance by any stretch of the imagination. No rushing touchdowns, but you saw some nice runs. Dylan Riley shouldering the main load in this game, taking over as that number one running back role. Still listed third on the depth chart, at least coming into this game. Don't know if they changed that last minute and I missed it, but he was, at least at the beginning of this week, still listed as third on the depth chart, but he took the number one reps. Now, Sire Gaines supposedly is supposed to still be on a bit of a snap count. They did give him 12 carries in this game, even in the garbage time element when the game was clearly won, so maybe that's not a factor yet anymore, and they wanted to reward Dylan Riley for what he did last week. But he had an okay game. It was 16 carries for 46 yards, had a couple of large yardage type of opportunities, and some of that coming in the second half when the game was a little bit out of hand. And after Roger Carrion went down in this game. So he only averaged about 3 yards per carry in this matchup. Didn't have any of those big breakaway runs, but I liked what I saw out of Dylan Riley. I thought that he was showing that nice quick burst, still good ball vision, missed a couple of holes that, at least from watching from, the television screen, it looks like maybe he could have kept going outside and had a bit of a bigger run, but still showing that kind of consistent 3-4 yard average type ability as a running back. And then the other running backs for Boise State continuing to step up and show the depth of the stable. Sire Gaines averaging 5.8 yards on this game, 69 yards rushing overall. Still not looking 100%. Even my wife was mentioning that he looked just a little bit slow on some of those breakaways. Still not looking 100%, but certainly looking like he's trending back in that direction. And then Malik Sherrod didn't get a lot of focus in this game. I'm not sure why that is, because he was playing really well when he did touch the ball. 9 carries, at least in the offense. We'll talk about special teams here in a moment. 9 carries for 49 yards, 5.4 yard average, 3 receptions, 21 yards overall. So in total yardage, he actually had the most yards of these running backs and between Dylan Riley and Sire Gaines with 70 yards. With 70 yards total there offensively. So he actually played really well. He had a really nice, in that second drive, really nice 22-yard run where it was going with the middle. He sees the outside open. He breaks the outside, broke 2 tackles, and just sprinted down the sideline. You can see the flash, those elements, those moments that we saw at Fresno State that really we thought was going to bring that potential into this season. I think that it's just dealing with that injury from last year, working through it, building off the rust. He is getting stronger as the season goes on. I expect him to be a big contributor, at least offensively, as we go throughout the rest of this season. So for Boise State overall, really strong performance. I liked what I saw out of them overall. There was, again, definitely some moments of hesitancy, from Maddox Matson, so he wasn't throwing with that same confidence. The offense overall definitely stalled out a few times. They did have to kick a couple of field goals when they were in the high red zone range, but that gave Boise State an opportunity to work on their special teams, which they needed to do in this game, so I'm not mad. They won the game, but obviously a couple of missed opportunities. Maddox Matson fumbling a ball there on drive number 5, a really unforced error. He got kind of hit, but the ball wasn't touched. He fumbles for 15 yards, but Boise State in a second and goal from the 20, misses a wide open Chris Marshall. Another opportunity in the second half where Boise State's drive stalls out and they're unable to get to finish, but they are able to finish with a field goal. And so Boise State does still have some things they need to work on. I liked overall what I saw of this offensive line performance. Again, it wasn't the complete domination that we saw versus Air Force, but Boise State overall had really good pass protection. Maddox Matson not hurried too much. Obviously, when they're in the play action type phase, there's a little bit of a different focus. So some guys were breaking through on those, and Max Madsen's being a little hindered by the leg. You could tell he was struggling to get away from them and deliver an accurate ball. But overall, when you're talking about more pocket passing type situations, the offensive line protection was really, really strong. And that's been a trend we've seen throughout the back end of the season, throughout the last few games of this season so far. And then the run blocking, again, wasn't dominant like last week, but it was really solid against a App State who, coming into this game, they were only giving up about 60 yards a game against the run. So they are really, really good at stopping the run. And Boise State looked like they were in control at the line of scrimmage in this matchup. Now, we'll have to see how that translates to Notre Dame. I think, obviously, that's going to be a little bit more of a struggle. I think that goes without saying. So we'll see how this offensive line progression continues to improve. I still think they're having some issues with the right side of the offensive line for Boise State. So they're going to need to continue to shore up that. But overall, the play calling, really, really solid in this game. The actual application as far as the wide receivers being able to get open on their routes, Max Madsen, even though struggling to find them, really, really strong performance. And then the running game, while we didn't see any huge breakaway type runs, I thought it was a really solid performance overall in a game that obviously was focusing more on the pass, and I think that's necessary. The running game gets its momentum going versus Air Force. Now the passing offense, has an opportunity to get its momentum going coming into Notre Dame, start to build that chemistry. This was the perfect opportunity. It's obviously App State's weakness. Boise State went after it. I think that was an intentional move by the coaching staff, and Boise State played really well in both aspects in this game. So offensively in this game, I'm going to give them an A- performance overall. Again, I think that there were some moments, Max Madsen struggling in this game, mostly in the first half. He had about 150 yards passing in the first half, had about 170 yards passing in the second half. I really thought he improved into the back end of this game. But Max Madsen struggling, mostly explainable, I think, by still recovering from that injury from last week. But the struggling still clearly not on the top of his game. A lot of drop passes, even from normally reliable players like Matt Lauder. He had a drop touchdown that was a really good throw of Max Madsen, hits him right in the hands. He's going to the ground, and he just doesn't survive the ground. And it wasn't even necessarily because of the tackle. He just didn't survive the ground. That should have been a touchdown. That ended up forcing a field goal in that situation. And so there was a couple missed opportunities, wide receiver / tight end wise. There was a couple missed opportunities by Max Madsen. The running game not being explosive, but overall, really, really solid performance. 473 total yards of offense in this game, so an A- performance for the offense overall. And again, I want you to be adding in your comments. I didn't say that at the beginning, but I meant to. I want you to be adding in your comments as we go throughout this video. Please let me know what your thoughts were on this game, how you feel about coming into Notre Dame next week, what kind of fears you still have, what nervousness or anxiety you have from what the performance we saw today, and what fears have potentially been qualmed, where you're finding confidence in this team, just your thoughts on this performance, and again, how it's going to impact into next week. Please put those comments down below as we go throughout this game, and if you disagree with me, I want to hear those disagreements. I want to have that conversation with each and every one of you. So moving on to looking at the defense for Boise State, the offense played really, really well, but Boise State won this game because of an absolutely dominant, truly dominant performance by this Boise State defense. Probably the best defense performance I've seen out of a Boise State team versus an FBS opponent in a while. I mean, even going back into last season, this Washington State and Utah State, obviously those were great games, Boise State defensively, and as a team overall. But in this game against a team that was playing against their weakness, and especially when you take into account everything that this defense has dealt with so far coming into this season, so many issues that they've had to work through, and especially the struggle with the secondary, all of the pressure, the outside noise and negativity coming into this matchup, the fact that they were able to come into this game and have a performance like they did today, absolutely amazing. I do want to take a pause, though, before we talk about the rest of his performance and just mention, obviously, sending prayers to Mickey, who got hurt in this game on a special teams play, took a really bad hit, may have lost consciousness, was not entirely clear. They brought the stretcher out very quickly. If he did lose consciousness, he regained it, was able to put a thumbs up as he was being taken off the field. Obviously, Mickey's done such an incredible job stepping up into that nickel role for Boise State, and so want to send prayers and thoughts to him and to his family as well, hoping that he is okay. I don't have any inside knowledge on what's going on. Want to make sure that he is okay. And also Roger Carrion, he got hurt towards the back end, had to be taken off on the cart as well. Hopefully an abundance of caution in that kind of situation, but obviously a key contributor for Boise State, and you never want to see any of these guys get hurt. At the end of the day, It's just football, right? It's not life or death. There's nothing going on. You win the game, you lose the game. The end results, I mean, for fans like us, it might hurt, and I'm sure the players take it seriously, but at the end of the day, it's never worth somebody getting injured. And so I want to pray that hope that both these guys are able to get out of this and be okay. So moving back into this defensive performance for Boise State, when you talk about a dominant performance and starting with the secondary, coming up against one of the absolute best, when you talk about rankings coming into this game, one of the absolute best passing offenses in college football against a Boise State defense that I said was 85th. They were 85th in the passing defense, having gone up against an FCS team and an option. Now, you thought coming into this game, there's no way Boise State's going to be able to just hold this team, this offense, and slow them down at all. Now, that's when I say you, I do mean a lot of the fan base thought that. I was thinking this was going to be a much better game for Boise State defensively. They didn't have to deal with a rushing quarterback. The previous 3 games, the Achilles heel of Boise State, going back even 3 seasons, has been the rushing quarterback. They started to figure it out last season. They've obviously lost that knowledge, and they're regaining it this year. The running quarterback just absolutely throws a wrench into everything that Boise State does defensively for whatever reason. And the last 3 games have had a running quarterback, and not just running quarterback, obviously, when you're facing the option, a lot more running they're thinking about, but a running quarterback that has played havoc with how this secondary and defense overall plays. When you're talking about the blitz being able to get through everything, the secondary, where their eyes are looking, what they're having to think about versus their assignments versus also the potentiality of the QB run, it just messes everything up. For this game, I said Boise State doesn't have to deal with that. Their pressure is going to be effective. Their secondary can focus on their assignments. And I think that you're also going to end up seeing the positive benefit of that bye week. We didn't see it last week because it was an option offense. Boise State had a very specific game plan that allowed some things to happen secondary-wise because they were so focused on stopping the option, and it worked. If you can beat the option, Air Force is never going to beat you through the air. They may get some big moments, some big opportunities, but they're never going to truly win the game in the passing attack. And Boise State did well against the option. But I said that is not reflective. That single game is not reflective necessarily of what Boise State is going to be doing the rest of the season. We still do not know, I said coming into this game, how well Boise State has recovered in the bye week, what the learning points applied have been, whether they have been effective or not, because they haven't faced a true offense. This game showed that Boise State secondary was able to apply lessons and changes from the bye week into this matchup and had a dominant performance. Boise State held App State, a team averaging over 300 yards passing, one of the top passing yards in the country, held them to 65 yards passing. 65 yards passing, and 63 of those yards came in the first half. So Boise State, this secondary held Appalachian State to 2 yards. 2 yards passing. 2 yards in the entire second half. I just want that to sink in for a moment, because this has been a secondary that has received, rightfully so, abundant criticism from the fan base for several years now. I really thought we started to see at the end of last season them starting to fix their problems and become a unit that was actually a strength and not a weakness to the team in the back end of the last 6-7 games of the season last year. Coming this season, complete reversal, back to what we've traditionally seen on the secondary, complete liability. That was not the case this game. Shutting out the noise is one thing, but I also think they took their performance personally. They took the criticism personally, and they came out with a desire to prove Bronco Nation wrong in this aspect, that they could change, that they could get better. And we are all today, whether you thought that they were going to do well in this game or not, incredibly thankful that that was the case, because Boise State secondary, Mari Warren, to his credit, had his secondary absolutely prepared for this game. The defensive blitzes from Eric Chenander and the defensive coverage overall, absolute incredible game plan. The adjustments made at halftime to continue to keep that pressure on and to continue. I mean, 2 pick sixes in this game. 2 pick sixes. Boise State coming in this game had 2 interceptions in the entire season, and both of them towards the end of the game, kind of desperation mode. Boise State had 2 pick sixes. One of them, while the game was still in the balance very early in the first quarter. 2 pick sixes, 3 interceptions overall, and a forced fumble. Boise State's defense came out looking for blood, and the momentum and energy that and the chemistry that they've built in this game I think are going to play dividends going up against Notre Dame. This was a great performance for this Boise State secondary. It wasn't just passing, offensively, rushing, Going up against the rush overall for Boise State, the run defense was also really strong. 60 yards rushing allowed in the first half, only 119 yards allowed rushing overall in the game. Really, really strong performance overall. A couple of really big key individual performances in this game that I want to shout out. Ty Benefield continuing to lead in tackling. Some, again, hard hits. Not necessarily to the same level that we saw versus Air Force, but some still really strong hard hits from Ty Benefield. Marco Nociani had a really strong game. 6 tackles for him. Braxton Feely, you could see his presence because the first 3 drives of this game, he actually got injured in the very first drive and had to go out. And then that's when App State got a lot of their rushing yards right up the middle, which I think that is a sign for concern. When you're looking at all these positives and you're excited about the things that Boise State did well, you look at some things that continue to be points of concern and potential learning points going into next week. That is a bit of a sign of concern. Now, it's obviously hard to replace your number one defensive player on defense overall. I mean, not just on the defensive line, but Braxton Feely coming back was such a huge, huge boost for this defense because he was one of the top players for Boise State returning until he decided to transfer. So him coming back, such a huge, huge thing for Boise State. So obviously it's hard to replace one of the top defenders overall, and especially an integral part of your defensive line, but it does expose a little bit of depth there for Boise State in the center of that defensive line. App State did have some pretty successful runs there up the middle, those 3 drives until he came back right there towards the end of drive number 3. And so for Braxton Feely, his absence certainly felt, but when he was in the game, his presence very much so felt. He was able to come back into this game, instantly had a sack, an 8-yard sack, and then followed up the next drive with a 6-yard sack, had 2 sacks in this game for negative 14 yards. Great performance by him. Amarian McCoy, he had that pick 6 early in the game, 26-yard pick 6 return. Great to see him performing against that potential. He's played really well overall in coverage so far this season, and finally being able to get that opportunity for that interception. And then for Bone Phillips, he had a pick 6 as well later on. He had a great game. Phelps has really stepped up into that linebacker role for Boise State. One of those guys that has been stepping in to fulfill the absence of Simpson from last season. 6 tackles overall in this game and a 33-yard pick 6. Really, really strong performance. He didn't get any sacks this game, but he brought a lot of pressure in this one, including forcing a tip ball that was almost intercepted. And then Sherrod Smith, an interception for him as well. A player that, again, hasn't seen the field very much, coming in having a big impact in this one. And then Malachi Williams, a transfer from Idaho. He had a forced fumble in this game, but early on he also had a key 3rd down stop early in the first half where App State still had a chance of getting into this game. He had a key 3rd down stop that gave Boise State the ball back close to the 50 and allowed them to really set themselves up in good field position. So for Boise State defensively in this game, I liked what I saw overall in this matchup. I think Irby also played really, really well. He had a couple of very nice deflections in very, very strong coverage. He did not get deep in this game. None of the Boise State defenders got beat deep in this game. There were a couple of opportunities more early on, first drive type situation for App State where they were able to get a play through and have some yards after catch situation, but no deep balls allowed in this game. No true deep balls allowed in this game. The one long yardage type situation for App State came right towards the end of the first half after a special teams gaffe, and there was some momentum on their side. They had a long run, and then they were able to run it in for a touchdown. But their main weapon, their passing game, completely neutralized in this matchup. And the second half, while the first half had a couple of moments of deficiency, the second half was complete domination, aside from drive number 2, which I've already talked about there for that special teams gap. Aside from that, complete domination by this Boise State defense, and including when the backup came in, Boise State's own backups being able to match that intensity, getting some interceptions, some forced fumbles, some tip balls. I liked what I saw from start to finish for this Boise State defense, and so I'm going to give them a solid A+. This was one of the best defensive performances I've seen out of Boise State, maybe since the UNLV game right there to end the season. Even then, this was just such a dominant defensive performance throughout the entire game. whereas UNLV was really dominant first half. It's a good game in the second half, but this one was a dominant start to finish performance against an offensive team, a very, very potent offensive team. This is not a garbage program that's probably not going to make bowl eligibility. They already had 2 wins coming in this game. They're not a FCS program. I don't want people looking at App State and saying, well, Boise State just beat them because they're terrible. I don't think that's the case. I think App State is a strong, 7-8 type win team, a good middle-of-the-road type program, potentially with a higher upside than that, and Boise State made them look like an FCS program in this game, an App State team that I have a lot of respect for, and Boise State made them look like an FCS program. And App State fans were really melting down on Twitter about their team because of how good Boise State was in this game, and I don't think that's a reflection on App State. I think it is truly a reflection on Boise State and what they were able to do defensively and providing opportunities for their offense. Now, for Boise State special teams, the one area of the team that you thought was going to be the biggest issue, that has been the biggest issue through the first 3 weeks, the kicking game, actually was not a issue for Boise State in this matchup. You hated to see Boise State not being able to finish drives, missed opportunities, wide open Chris Marshall and Mags Messon doesn't hit. For whatever reason, you hate to see Boise State missing those opportunities, but those missed opportunities turned into the opportunity for the special teams to actually build some momentum going into Notre Dame, and they used that to their full potential. Colton Boomer, who has just struggled so much this season, hit 2 field goals, one that you would expect him to make, about 20-ish yard field goal, and then one from the left hash, not an easy kick for a field goal kicker, 40-yard field goal. That I was absolutely shocked by. I don't think anybody thought that one was going to go through based on what we've seen. He was 2 out of 2 with a 40-yard long. That is going to, I think, pay massive dividends going into next week's game versus Notre Dame. The fact that Boise State now has some reliability, they don't have to play so desperate like we saw versus Air Force when they get into the kicking type situation. Now they have the knowledge that go out, play your game plan. If it doesn't work out, we can still get 3 potentially. I still think there's probably a little bit of lack of confidence that you have to do more than just kick 2 field goals to start to regain trust in yourself and overall. So I'm not saying that it's 100%, but there is now that knowledge that it's not a guaranteed miss if Boise State lines up to kick a field goal. They can make it. And obviously, different when you're on the road in a very hostile environment, but Boise State can make a field goal, and not just a field goal, a 40-yard field goal from left hash, which is not an easy field goal to make. That was the real shining highlight from the Boise State special teams. Definitely not expecting that at all, and that was the key moment. However, the other areas where Boise State's been decently strong at so far this season were not shining moments. So special teams continues to be an adventure. They start to improve in one area and the other areas go down again. For punting, the actual punting itself from Oscar Doyle was really solid. 4 punts for a 41-yard average. Should have been more, and the reason it wasn't more was because Boise State got fooled again on another special teams return, special teams type moment, just like UCF fooling them with that fake punt. Appalachian State did what is not that uncommon of a trickeration move where they roll out a fake returner and have him run to one side of the field and try and distract the coverage unit. You see that quite a lot in football. It doesn't usually work. Well, it worked today. The Boise State coverage team literally ran past the defender, the returner, thinking the ball was going to go somewhere else. And the rest of the players were basically just standing there. And then the player catches it and ran it 49 yards back. So when I say that Doyle's average should have been more, that's because he didn't get any yards on a punt. That was 49 yards coming back. 49-yard return that ended up setting up a touchdown for Appalachian State. You can't do that. You cannot allow that kind of surprise play on special teams. We've seen it time and time again. That Boise State special teams has struggled not just in kicking, but in their coverage going back to last season. And then this season, they seem to be very, very much vulnerable to those trickeration type plays. They're not, and I put that on the coaching staff. I really, truly put that on the coaching staff, specifically here, Stacey Collins. This is an issue. I think when you have a team getting fooled by little trickeration moves like that, it comes back to the preparation, the film preparation, and how these players are preparing. I said preparation like 3 times, but anyhow, how these players are preparing and getting ready for the game to come out and play. That is an issue, I think, with the coaching staff in what they are doing to set this team up for success. And when you have early in a season, twice where a team through a formation type of change is able to fool you so badly. This is a type of mistake that could have massive consequences versus a team like Notre Dame that's going to be able to expose you. Boise State's defense, offense, good enough to make up for one special teams gaffe. In a Notre Dame game, that is going to be a absolute fight if you're going to stay in it at all. It's not going to be a game they're going to come and blow them out and have all this margin for error. You're going to have zero margin for error. Like we saw versus Oregon, right? One or two special teams mistakes are enough to seal your fate in that type of matchup. Boise State has got to get itself together. If there's one unit that is continuing to struggle with consistency overall, Boise State's offense has stepped up. Their offensive line is playing well. The quarterback and wide receiver connection is starting to work. Boise State's defense, their secondary, showed that they can prepare for a game and come out strong. Boise State's special teams still struggling, even though they can improve in one area, struggling to be consistent throughout. And not just in their coverage, also in their return game as well. Malik Sherrod struggling to catch the ball on the kick returns. A surprise for a player of his experience, a player who was part of special teams when he was at Fresno State. You don't expect to see that out of a player of his caliber, and he struggled to catch a kick return. It was a kick return that Boise State was in an advantageous situation because it was a 15-yard penalty previous to the kick that put App State back before the kick, and so Boise State had an opportunity to really take this one back for a long run, and Malik Sherrod doesn't catch, fumbles the ball, and has to pick it up and only got it to the 20. On a kickoff that, again, App State was kicking from 15 yards further back than they should have been. You would expect them to at least be able to get to 30, and he only got to the 20 because of that fumble, finally picking it up, not losing the ball, but only getting back to the 20. And then on punt return throughout the game, Malik Sherrod had multiple opportunities where he could have returned punts. In situations we have seen him return punts. The punt return versus Air Force, he had a defender in his face, caught the pass, made a move, and got 7 yards. I was so impressed by that. I thought, okay, this is starting to show those sparks, that fire out of Malik Sherrod. We're going to start to see him really step up. I even predicted in my last video, my game review, that we would see a touchdown out of Malik Sherrod at some point in punt return this season. If there was ever an opportunity, it was in this game. He had at least 3 punts that he called fair catch, that there was not a defender within 6 yards of him. And one time there were two Boise State coverage blockers back right in front of him, and the defenders weren't within 6 yards, and he could have gone up fielding and made a play. That was really, really confusing. It wasn't a wet game. The ball wasn't super slippery. It wasn't cold outside. It's very, very confusing to see all of those struggling. And again, when you start to look at special teams that's consistently struggled, you have to start to look at why are they consistently struggling? Who at top could potentially be responsible for consistent struggling from special teams unit? This is an area that Boise State has always hung their hat on, that they've always taken so much pride. When you look at the Chris Peterson days of Boise State, special teams was the top unit. It was the one that everybody wanted to be a part of. You had Ian Johnson out there blocking kicks, Austin Pettis and Titus Young, all these players involved in special teams. It was an honor to be part of that unit because they held themselves to such a high standard. It really hurts as a Boise State fan to not see that standard upheld. That is one area. If you look at a team that struggled at the beginning of the season and has fixed so many different points of actually reestablishing the standard for Boise State, if there's one area this team still needs to improve, it is special teams. So overall, I'm going to give them a C+, and they would be trending to a much lower grade if Colton Boomer had not stepped up in a big way and overcome his own internal monsters and been able to make 2 out of 2 for a 40-yard. That deserves praise. That is a A+ type performance for him, considering the precedent that he had set beforehand. So overall, for the special teams, only a C+ grade instead of potentially much worse. But that is an area. If there's one area out of this game that I bring concern, maybe 2 would be, what is Max Metz's true health like? Because he needs to be 100% when we play Notre Dame. And then the second is, and obviously the injuries that Boise State suffered this game, obviously hoping and praying that they would recover. But then the second big factor for me is, how does special teams show up versus Notre Dame? Are we going to be able to see the massive improvements we've seen the rest of the team over a week or two type of preparation? Can they do that versus Notre Dame? Now for Boise State, keys to the game, how did Boise State perform against them? Key number 1, secondary, answer the criticism. That was the number 1 key coming into this game. And if there was an A+++++ grade, they would be like in the Christmas Story, right? Where they're just going on the turkey with plus. This was a massive, massive performance by this Boise State secondary. I could not be prouder of the job that the Boise State State players and coaching staff, and huge shout out to Warren getting this team prepared. Could not give a huger shout out to them. An incredible performance overall for this Boise State secondary. Use all of your weapons. I think Boise State did a solid job in this. They weren't so focused on being only a strong run team that they forgot about the pass. Passing game had a huge game in this one, and I really think that Nate Potter is growing into his role as offensive coordinator. I like a lot of the offense that I see out of him. Week 1, I really thought that was just kind of a replication of Dirk Cutter's type blueprint, and he has put his own touch into the offense the last few weeks, and I really liked what I saw out of this offense today for Boise State. I'm going to give that a solid A overall, and then give special teams a chance to establish confidence, and was mostly talking about the kicking game in this one. Definitely accomplished in the fact that Boise State was willing to go for field goals. So they could have had a situation where they, like versus, USF or even versus Air Force, are playing that type of desperation. They're just continuing to throw the ball into tight windows that you should have no business throwing the ball in there, or even going for a fourth down in places you don't think that there's no reason they should be going for a fourth down. Boise State said, okay, we didn't make it into the end zone. Let's give our field goal kickers a chance. Every time it made sense to kick a field goal, Boise State did so in this one, and I liked what I saw out of that, and it gave them confidence. They made those field goals, and that, I think, is going to play big dividends going into the game versus Notre Dame. So A+ overall. So for this matchup, a really strong performance in this game for Boise State. They're going to be able to build on this foundation versus Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame is going to be a completely different test. Not only are they a much stronger program, but they are also a much, much scarier road environment. Probably one of the toughest road environments Boise State has played in a while. This is going to be really hard. This is going to rank right up there with going and playing at Oregon and at Washington, and you don't have Ashton Jeanty now. You have an offense that has shown they can be successful post Ashton Jeanty, but now you have to go up against one of the top teams in college football. Even though they're not the top 5 type program that Boise State was going to be playing at the beginning of the year, they're still a top 25 team. And if Boise State wants any chance at all of reestablishing their path to the CFP, this has got to be a win. It really does. I mean, maybe with a loss, if a lot of craziness happens outside, you can get there. But this game, if Boise State wants any chance of controlling their own destiny, has got to be a win. There are some key continuing learning points for Boise State. I think there are still some struggles on the offensive line, specifically when you start looking at the right side of that unit. I think there are still some struggles for this Boise State defense when you start looking at depth. Overall, loved what I saw from Boise State stepping up. It's going to be a different monster next week. And then specifically looking at the special teams, I think that is going to be something that Boise State has got to fix going into next week. So I am so excited to preview that matchup. I have more confidence in Boise State's chances in that game than I did certainly week 1, but even coming into this matchup versus Appalachian State, this is exactly the type of performance I wanted to see. Not because I'm going to say, Boise State beating Appalachian State 47-14 means they can beat Notre Dame, but Boise State being able to fix their problems, being able to have the awareness and know how. It's a different thing to be able to say, okay, that's a problem for us. It's a completely different thing to know how to fix it. The fact that this Boise State defensive staff and staff overall, the fact that this Boise State coaching staff has been able to identify a multitude of issues coming out of week 1 and actually start fixing them each and every single week and getting better, making leaps and bounds. This week 5, 4th game of the season team is unrecognizable compared to USF that we saw in week 1. So the fact that Boise State's coaching staff has shown that they are able to establish a culture of continuation of getting better each and every single week and identifying all of those problems and actually intentionally fixing them, that gives me a lot of hope and trust going into Notre Dame that they have a chance in this game. Now, whether or not I'll be predicting a win or a loss in that one, you'll have to wait to my game preview. You can look for that preview coming out probably Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, depending on upload speed, and I'll have a new sponsor that I'll be announcing in that game, or in that game preview. So thank you so much for watching. Again, please put your comments down below. Let me know your own thoughts and excitement expectations for this program after this performance, and just a little bit of a peek ahead to what your thoughts are for Notre Dame. Again, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like to subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue!